Thank you, Kriti. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for coming. So let me start by saying that we had actually scheduled this hack discussion to follow the release of the final Diridon Station area plan, the details of Google's Downtown West project, and the details of the community benefits agreement, which is in process. Needless to say, none of this has been released publicly at this point, which is okay because there's plenty to talk about. And there's a critical piece of the puzzle, which is the affordable housing implementation plan, which city staff and the housing department have been doing a lot of work on, and is really important thinking and planning on how we're going to meet our goals for the station area. We'll talk about that in a second. We've been concerned all along that as the super complicated discussion around the Google project comes forward, that some of the details of this plan are going to be missed. And so we're really pleased to have an opportunity to bring this to you and get it elevated and back on the table. So in general, the station area, which we all know has been dominated particularly in public discussion by the Google project, is actually a larger area. We've been advocating hard, and I think everybody's committed to creating a vibrant mixed-use space where people can live, work, and play, that's active 18 hours a day, and that really importantly is accessible to people of all incomes and abilities in ways that reflect the tremendous diversity and culture of San Jose. And part of the redevelopment of the station area is frankly connected to the redevelopment of downtown. And this is an exciting time. There's tremendous new opportunity to bring jobs to the city, but we know that we need to be accountable for the housing impact of all of these new jobs. These new jobs are going to need homes. And that's why housing has been such a priority in this discussion from the beginning. Back in 2018, when the plan came to council, the top general principle was that everyone take responsibility to address the housing crisis, including the city, Google, and other companies and developers in the area, that we need stronger tools to help fight displacement, that we focus on affordable housing throughout the city and in the station area. And importantly, we set an expectation, some call it a goal, some call it a requirement, of 25% of the units in the station area being offered at below market rates. So throughout, there's been a focus on housing and affordable housing and concerns about displacement. And here we are, we're at the end. And so the question is, how have we prepared for that? What do the plans say? How are we going to live up to the standards that we set at the beginning of this process? And so we really feel like this is a very important discussion right now. I would point out 2018 was the beginning of a process. A stationary advisory group and extensive public outreach process continued to acknowledge that housing, affordable housing, and preventing displacement need to be top priorities in this process. So with that, I want to introduce, and we're very pleased that they're with us today, Jacky Morales-Ferrand, who's the director of the housing department for the City of San Jose, and Kristen Clements, the division manager for the policy group in the housing department in the City of San Jose. So let me turn it over briefly to Jacky to get us started. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you, Matthew. I'm just really going to give some introductory comments, additional introductory comments, and then I'm really going to turn it over to Kristen, who will walk you through the plan. So Diridon really is a tremendous opportunity for the city, being the largest infill development in our area that's mostly controlled by one developer. And so while the plan applies to the entire site, you know, obviously we're all keenly focused on what Google will be able to provide as well. And what also made it exciting for the housing department was it's also the first time that we've developed a comprehensive plan, affordable housing plan, that addresses all 3 Ps of housing, again, of which Kristen will review. So while we've been known for our investment in the production side of housing, and we will continue to do that, the department has really expanded our efforts to look very closely on protection and what we can do to strengthen our laws and regulations to ensure that tenants who are here can remain here. And we're beginning to expand our work in the protection area. And what has, this plan that Kristen's going to review, what I'm really proud of is that it, for the first time, really discusses all aspects of housing and how we can do more. And then finally, I do want to acknowledge that Kristen Clements has led this work. This is her baby project, and she has done a great job. And the whole process of, from starting with our anti-displacement work that was very community-based and actually was centered around our community and hearing the voices of our community, we've tried to lift those ideas and bring them forward into the Diridon plan as well. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kristen to walk you through the work.
Thanks, Jackie. Thanks for your kind words. This is really interesting work. And I have to say before we start, I'm just so excited about the opportunities at Diridon. There aren't that many large station developments going on in the country or really the world. And so feel really lucky that one is happening in San Jose and that we can be in on the ground floor to kind of help design and give input as to what is going to go forward there and who gets to live in the station area. And that's what this plan is about. So with that, you get to look at slides. Thank you for that. It's the implementation plan. Next slide. So the City Council directed us to work on this, and the direction came from a couple of different actions. For those of you who've been in San Jose or around for a while, you may remember that as Google wanted to move forward with its development plans in 2018, they negotiated with the city to sell parcels that had previously been acquired for the ballpark that was going to be downtown for the A's, which is still like the A's. Sad that they're not coming, but this is also super cool. And so as the council considered that memorandum of understanding with Google related to the land sale, these were some of the points of direction that they gave to us. And they were very clear that they felt like the station area, that second bullet, that housing should be there for extremely low income residents all the way up to what they call the missing middle and what we are terming moderate income households, integrated together with market rate housing. And that there should be a goal of all the housing in the Diridon Station area to be restricted affordable at those levels, and 25% of it to be restricted affordable. And then there'd be a community benefits plan on top of that. And so with subsequent city council motions, they directed us to come back with an anti-displacement plan, which we did in September last year. And thank you to those of you who were involved with that and helped us with that effort to develop and get it approved. It's very exciting. And then they told us, please do an implementation plan. How are you going to get 25% of the housing in this area to be affordable? Because it is not that simple of a task. And then they also said, look some more at how much should be ELI within that 25% affordable. Next slide. So as Jackie said, we're taking a 3 Ps approach to this work. And, I think a lot of you are familiar with this. It got made very popular with CASA a few years back. And it really echoes what we put together for our anti-displacement strategy citywide. And a lot of that citywide strategy is informing and kind of hooking up with the strategies that we are trying to identify as appropriate for Diridon. So first, with production, the goal is to produce more subsidized housing and restricted affordable as you create more market rate housing. The second piece is to keep preserving the restricted affordable housing that you have, but also look at the naturally affordable housing that is unregulated in the market and see if you can turn that into restricted affordable for lower income households. And maybe some moderate income, because that's our goal here, is the whole range. And then third, as you do this, of course, you have to help renters to be protected from displacement as this area undergoes a huge transformation. And that means policies and programs implemented. A lot of that is citywide, but some of that could also focus on this place. So while council directed us to focus on the production piece, we took the best practices knowledge that we'd been learning with our 10 city policy link anti-displacement network in 2018 and 2019 that really created the momentum, helped to create the momentum and the support for us to do our anti-displacement work locally that we'd been wanting to do. And then again, synced up, created these space for these other two Ps. And again, that's, per best practices. And now it's very consistent with what the city council has already approved in our citywide strategy. Of course, with COVID, we have seen how important the protection piece is. And we all know that all of these have to hang together because there's no way to produce yourselves out of all of the challenges we've got in our expensive market. Next slide. So there are two different focus areas defined in Diridon, and I have to, first of all, give tribute. Jacky says this is my report. I helped craft the scope, and strategic economics is the brains behind so much of this analysis. They're really great to work with. They analyzed areas in other places that had major transit coming through. And we asked them, try to find an area that you could prove has a price effect when major transit improvements come through. And they did find evidence based on BART in the East Bay that a half-mile radius around the station area has very good evidence that there will be price escalation impacts there. And so for that reason, we defined two areas. One, that central solid line is the Diridon Station area itself. It looks like a little person with a hat kind of going southwest with a little bag. That's how I think of him. And then the dotted line area around it is the half-mile radius area. We call that the neighborhood stabilization area. So the goal is to focus production in the station area, the center part, and then the preservation and protection, the anti-displacement, other strategies in that half-mile buffer as well. So again, this syncs up really well with our citywide strategy. Next slide. So this is kind of a nice snapshot and summary of what you would need to know about the plan, kind of if you want the bottom line. What does this plan do? First, it echoes what the council told us to do, which is set a goal for 25% of all housing to be restricted affordable. And as we thought about that goal, we wanted to make sure it reflects a balance of what's already there and what we're building. And so we thought about it, and it's really 25% of all housing incorporating what's getting built. So at the time of build out, in the draft amended Diridon Station area, that would be restricted affordable from ELI up to moderate. And then in the neighborhood stabilization area, the half-mile buffer, we want to make sure that we don't lose any low-income renter households, so no net loss. We wanted to decrease the percentage of people paying too much, so severely cost-burdened renters in that area. We wanted to make sure we didn't lose any restricted affordable that already exists in this area and push that, that's a long-term goal, not just to 2040 like the area plan. And then really, in order to help keep people in place, we need to do something about acquiring and preserving some existing buildings and turning them into restricted affordable. So we're suggesting the creation of a preservation pilot program in the boundary area. And then finally, based on case studies that Strategic Economics researched and other major station area developments, there was a disproportionate impact on existing residents in those station areas, particularly Black and Latinx households, that once the station and the transit improvements were done, they disproportionately were impacted and had to leave. And so we wanted to make sure that we were tracking, what is the balance based on race and ethnicity and demographics in general of the people in the area. Government's a little bit limited as to what actions it can take for protected classes, but we wanted to make sure that we knew what was going on at least, and then figure out what we could do, if anything. Next slide. So here's the list of what the production related strategies are. And, I'll go through them quickly, but really we're going to be building in the station area, but also the areas right around the station area, number one, are going to compete well for restricted affordable funding sources. And so it would be good to try to direct some affordable developers' attention and resources to the areas around the station area as well, not just in it. Number two, the state's Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities Funds, perfect for this area, we hope, because it's designed to make people, more likely to walk to transit, for instance. And how can we leverage that program and help create affordable housing too? Number three, we've already done. We had a little delay probably in getting this forward, but in the meantime, the City Council just approved changes to the inclusionary housing ordinance. And we hope that those changes will make it more likely that developers develop the units in their developments. And so the requirements have been tweaked a little bit, hopefully to make that more realistic. Number four is, how can we be creative about lowering costs by looking at different technologies like laminated timber and other ideas. Number five, we recently passed a commercial linkage fee for affordable housing, which is awesome news. And we just got revenue projections, and you know what? They're pretty good. So we're happy. And so one idea is that we could prioritize linkage fee revenues generated in this area and to be used back in the area, at least for a period of time, because we know the restricted affordable that's deeply affordable, of course, has to be subsidized. So obviously we have to get resources to the area. Number six, park fee changes, I believe also just were approved as well, that there is a slight change to moderate income housing units, park fees assessments, and that could also help production here. And number seven, the perimeter area of Diridon has a lot of low-rise homes. So ADU strategies could be helpful for those areas to densify at least a little bit in the area. Next slide. So to build our preservation ecosystem, as we say, first, we thought we need to identify a formal pilot program area to acquire and then rehab existing buildings. And then number two, we need to have developers that want to do this work with us. This is not that easy to focus on smaller buildings, probably because the amount of resources available will be limited. And so smaller buildings will probably be the target. And so we really need the development community to step up or come in from other places who want to do this different kind of work than development. And number three, we need the money, therefore, to put out in the forms of notices of funding availability for this. If you put it out, they will come. But that's going to involve probably a layered fund of some sort. It's not a simple thing necessarily, because folks will have to compete with private market acquisitions that can be all cash, especially for small buildings, and they'll have to act fast. And so it may require a fund being established, but not being centered in the city, even though some city funds may be in there. So it's got to, that's why we call it an ecosystem. You've got to have all the pieces kind of in place to have it firing on all engines. So we've got to be working on that, number 3. And number 4, again, there are other complementary policies that we could be doing to support preservation. And we're starting to work on one right now, which is called the Community Opportunity Purchase Program. That is part of our citywide anti-displacement strategy that council told us to go forward with right now. And that could help nonprofits to acquire buildings. Next slide. So 3rd P, people need help who will be facing eviction, and the asterisk items also showed up in our citywide strategies, by the way. So number 1, legal services funding, which we're trying to do, but they're not going to be enough probably. With our federal funds. Number 2, we put in this AB 1482 anti-rent spike law. It can't really be enforced locally. It's a state law. And so unless we change the state law and allow for local enforcement, because it intersects so closely with our local ordinances that we already have to know it and advise people on it. So that is one idea to help protect people further. The 3rd is to expand the tenant protection ordinance, which is our just cause eviction ordinance, to include all rented units. There are a lot of rented single family and a lot of rented duplexes in this area. So it seems particularly appropriate here, and test that out. And number 4, on that point, the apartment rent ordinance, we had always been intending to look further at duplexes and whether it made sense to protect those as well. And we think that based on the data here, that it is appropriate to include this as a strategy for the city's ARO ordinance as well. And finally, number 5, the idea would be to create a kind of a help center in the Diridon Station area where people could go to try to access resources that might be available, maybe could go for trainings about their rights as landlords, as tenants, but really focus probably more on tenants about what they need to know and who they could go to for help. Next slide. So that's our plan. It is actually still posted on our website at this address. And right now we're in the process of taking the feedback that we got through public meetings and through one-on-one stakeholder meetings that people had requested for the last few months. And we are making changes, small changes to the plan, a couple of changes in strategies, frankly, because we think that that is people have brought up really good points. And so, especially give an example, like, how do we track the units? Well, don't you think we should track them by levels of affordability and make sure that we call out the extremely low income units, and make sure that it's a robust proportion of the total? Should we set a goal for the extremely low income units? So we've had a lot of good conversations on things like that, how to track over time, and other ideas for strategies. So we're going through that right now. And the next steps are that the amended Diridon Station Area Plan as a whole, which is the separate document, that is actually about to go to Planning Commission. And one of the chapters in it is the executive summary from this implementation plan. And so right now we are working on it. It's hot and heavy today, actually, to get that DSAP, amended DSAP, to Planning Commission next month. And then, but the Affordable Housing Implementation Plan, its path, it already went to Planning Commission for comments. It is just going to go to council now in May together with the amended DSAP. And then I think Google's on a separate path, different timing, and we could talk about that if you have questions on that. So with that, we're open to any questions.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Kristen. I'm going to go ahead and pass it to Matthew to take us through some questions. I know several came in and are continuing to come in, so we'll do our best to get to as many as possible. So Matthew, why don't you start us off? We have this one at the top.
Yeah, this is actually mine just to kick us off. I'm wondering what you see as the greatest challenges on the front end of this. We know this is a long-term plan, but we also know that things move quickly on the ground ahead of these kinds of big changes. What do you need to make this work?
Jackie, you want to take this? Do you want me to take this?
Go ahead, you can start and I'll jump in if I have anything to add.
My understanding is that it's really hard to get land in Diridon. And so, you know, we're hearing reports of land being $12 and $14 million an acre down there because the development can be so dense and go so high. And so I think actually accessing land in a confined area is going to be challenging for developers. And then I think the costs of development, because the land's so expensive and because it's going to be urban format and because it might be kind of mid-rise or vertically subdivided and a taller building is possible. Like, I think the logistics of the development will be challenging. That said, I think the supply of residents for any buildings that are going up down there going to be, the demand's going to be incredible, I think, on the flip side. But yeah, I think all of that. And then having enough resources from the city and from the county and other public funding sources to make sure we get allocations from the state, from CIDLAC and TCAC for the deals that need to go forward, also a little challenging. So, you know, it's called affordable housing. It's always hard.
Yeah, well, that leads...
Here's a hot area.
That leads directly to the next question that folks have raised, because we know that the sort of public resources outside of the city are scarce, and they're scarce in the city. So the question is, what are the projected commercial linkage fee revenues for the Diridon Station area? And that I don't know, you don't need to put too fine a point on it, but if you have a sense of your expectations and how they fit into the plan that you're presenting, that would be great to hear.
Yeah, and one of the things we wanted to make sure to not do in this plan is to, you know, can't point to Google too much, like whether Google goes forward, and which we all believe they are, in the development that they've created and are moving forward on. You know, they're only part of the station area. And so we're going to be seeing other development, obviously, in that area. And it's true, commercial linkage fees come from new development. And so this area of new development is going to generate the bulk, I think, of the city's commercial linkage fees, because North San Jose is probably more likely to see improvements to existing buildings, you know, in that industrial area, for instance. And so, I mean, we've seen revenue projections recently for the city's planning purposes. I don't know the breakout of what is coming, you know, where the sources would be. I think it's the city kind of ballparking, and I haven't seen a further breakout of it. The plan tries to go into some assumptions. You know, I think they're trying to, you know, our guidance to our consultants was just state your assumptions. Nobody knows what the future is really going to hold, but just try to state the assumptions.
Yeah.
So,
you know, we think those assumptions are important because they set some expectations. So it you know, nobody has a crystal ball today, but I hope and everybody here is sort of on board to figure out how to move forward and make sure those resources are available. You know, there's a couple.
So I'm trying to get that number for you. So
I know what we just saw, Jackie, if you want me to.
It is in the
repeat
study.
that.
You can drop.
So
That email, you know, we're hoping it is at least 20 million a year. We had the city budget had carried about 30 million. I thought this year we're expecting that to hopefully go up. Wait, am I getting confused?
yeah, so
That was Measure E this year.
yeah,
Sorry.
you're talking
We
about,
did just see something for
so
commercial.
I'll get you that number of what we're projecting. I just asked. I can't find it in all the gazillions of emails I
Well,
have, but
I know what they just said. So you want me to just say it?
Sure. We're
Okay.
they're
Yeah, we don't know where the revenues would be coming from place-wise, but we just got an estimate of about 40 million to budget for next year.
okay. Again, I'm sorry. That's you keep confusing it. That is the
No, I thought that was no. Okay, well, we can look at it.
that's our housing impact fee. I mean, that's a
Yeah, Measure E.
This is Measure E that Kristen keeps referring to. We have a projection, and before the end of this meeting, I'll let you know what it is.
Okay, sorry, I don't want to confuse things.
Yep, marvelous. So there's a couple of questions that are specific to the way that Google is going to meet the affordable housing needs in their plan. I know it's difficult to talk about this stuff right now because it's not all open in the public, but let me throw that to you and you can respond as appropriate.
So again, you're right. It's not in the public realm yet. It will be shortly, but you know, there's certainly, we have been working with them to incorporate the strategies that you just heard. And to the extent we could get them to look at things like land donation, as Kristen has said, the biggest challenge we fear is that we're not going to have an opportunity to develop. So you can have all the money in the world, but if you don't have land, then it makes it impossible for us to move forward. And so we're hoping to see a package that includes some land donations, the revenue going, you know, the commercial linkage fee, as we have indicated in our report, being prioritized for this development, with a goal of trying to reach the 25%.
Okay.
Jacky's right. I was wrong.
Great. So there's a number of questions about how we're going to kind of prioritize and meet the needs of really specific groups. Some of it is, you know, very low and extremely low income households. Some of it is looking at people with disabilities or seniors or survivors of domestic violence. Is there a strategy for how to figure out how to respond to the kind of complexity of the needs that we have in the city in this space?
Our revised inclusionary ordinance really set the stage to allow developers to build what we thought was their more of what that we thought they could accomplish in this tight market, which was to do the higher end of the affordable, and then to provide either land or funding to have the city then leverage resources such as tax credits and Measure A in order to build the deepest affordability that we can get in any development. And so our goal with this project, if potentially there is land donation, that would allow us to ensure that we could actually meet the goals of trying to create the broadest range of diversity in terms of income goals. And so the department is committed to doing that. The city council has said, you know, we have a strategy or a goal to spend 45% of the funding we receive to ensure we're targeting it towards ELI housing. So we're very committed to ensuring that there's a range of incomes in this community.
Okay. Just to be clear, I think the question was a little broader than the income ranges, and you don't have to get there, but there's, you know, there's an ongoing discussion about how do we meet the complexity of needs that folks have, folks with disabilities, or, you know, even larger families. And
sure, and I think yes, we will do that as well in terms of bedroom sizes, SROs potentially. And I did see the question in the chat regarding, is there a commitment to meet the minimum requirements of the law? And yes, so the plan doesn't talk about that. And I think that's interesting. If that is something we should have called out regarding ensuring the units, I personally think, you know, maybe the step to go farther, which is something I've always been interested in, it's just hard to get the time to do it, is the law does require these minimum requirements to have accessible units and also units for hearing impaired. And I guess the question I've always had, that I've always worried about, is we go to great lengths to build this housing. Does the housing actually go to the people who need it? What are the developers actually doing to ensure that that housing that's made for people with just, you know, to meet their needs actually goes to those, to people who actually need it? Because it's fine to build it, but if you never make an effort to fill it with the right people or the people who need it, then we've only, you know, we've only done a half of the, you know, the requirement. We really haven't fully envisioned or realized the potential of the units.
Yeah, agreed. The folks that are putting these questions into the chat, reach out to us and let's have a conversation about that and figure out how we can help Jacky realize her goals on this front, because I think it's a very important discussion. This is a good time to start it.
And just to clarify, we would not do SR units without a full-size refrigerator and stove.
Is that also in the chat? I'm trying not to follow the chat too closely.
I guess I was thinking we wouldn't do things like microwaves and those little teeny tiny refrigerators.
Right. So there's another question about how are you going to make sure, how are we collectively going to make sure that people who are being displaced are guaranteed housing in the project's affordable units? You know, is there going to be a way of responding to the immediate pressures that folks in the local area face? Or is this going to be opened up more broadly to county lists and focus? And how important is that to the anti-displacement priorities that I think you've gotten from council?
So one of the revisions we're going to make that we haven't fully had an opportunity to vet out, but because of public comment, we are talking about continuing to do more work regarding the history of the site. I know working partnerships with Berkeley did some preliminary work in that area regarding history and who lived on the sites beforehand. And so we're very interested in picking up some of that work and seeing if there's a potential to provide even greater protection to people who have actually gotten displaced because of these infrastructure improvements. It's something that San Francisco and other cities have been successful in creating. You know, San Jose has never done that before. So this is new territory for us. And so we have to do a little more, we have to do more work, not a little, more work to achieve that. But we decided we should edit the plan to include that as an opportunity for us to continue the work. But I'm going to let Kristen talk about the work we're already doing on trying to get preferences over the goal line.
Yeah, we've been working on anti-displacement tenant preferences. So for people who are in danger of being displaced, for a couple of years, we've run into some challenges with what the state expects if you want to use the preferences on projects that they fund, on affordable projects. So again, a tenant preferences, you have to identify the population and then give them the right to access kind of a second wait list that goes for a set aside of units that would otherwise be for the general public that are all affordable units. And so we're just talking about affordable units. The anti-displacement tenant preference work we are working hard on right now. The state is amending its guidance and is going to issue it, we believe, hopefully soon. But as to what they expect to see for jurisdictions that want to do preferences, what did they expect the legal analysis to be? And it's onerous. Because we all know preferences can be used to exclude people as well as include people. So that's why you have to make a lot of different arguments as to why you're doing this. The other preference that we are working on with very similar path is a neighborhood preference, which would benefit people who are living in the vicinity of affordable housing as it gets created. And again, actually not that easy to get approved from a fair housing law perspective. But we've been working on both of those things. And for the anti-displacement preference, you know, the places that get it, the idea is people who are living in a high displacement risk neighborhood would be able to get this preference based on where they are living, and then be able to go into any affordable development throughout the city. And so those who are currently living, you know, in the station area, of course, would be experiencing a really high displacement pressure and would qualify for that. So, and what Jacky's talking about would go beyond that. So we're doing this preference work, and then we're also looking into not only next doing a displaced person's preference, but beyond that, to try to see if this could be echoing larger redevelopment, displacement events, and actually have a transferable kind of asset, a certificate that one could get because there were certain attributes of this station area and public money put into it. So that's this next level beyond, which is what we're going to research. But that strategy and that research we want to add to the plan.
Great.
Because we hear so much about, like, yeah, my friends and my family just left. So what are you doing for us?
Well, I think
or we were driven out 3 years ago.
Yeah, the station area, and you've acknowledged a lot of the work that organizations have done trying to draw attention to this. But if there's one thing we learned is that, there's when a planning bomb, just an idea drops, it has a tremendous impact. We could call it a sparkler. I mean, I don't want to, but it has had a tremendous impact on real estate and the city in general. And oftentimes we do come at it late. There isn't a shovel in the ground, and the changes are already being experienced in communities. Yeah. So I'm really glad to hear that. Just as a FYI to everybody actually, I'll do this in my closing. There was one last question real quickly, and I don't know that you have the answer, but there's been discussion about how do we create asset development home ownership opportunities as well. And I'm wondering if you have any projected rental versus ownership for the affordable housing, or that's been part of the discussion.
So the city has tended to focus on rental housing because the amount of level of investment that we have per unit is much lower with a much longer guaranteed affordability. So here's Jacky going to put her philosophical hat on, and I'm just saying, this is Jacky, forget I'm the director of housing. This is not Jacky, director of housing. This is Jacky, just Jacky thinking. So Jacky thinking, my thoughts about it is that, I personally believe housing should be a right for everyone, and that it should not be a commodity that is traded in the market for its highest price. And the challenge is home ownership, just as rental, gets traded for the highest price on the market. And that's why we have a median single family housing price of $1.2 million, $1.3 million in the city of San Jose. So Jacky, not city, just believes that, this is not the way for us to be building wealth, is dependent on increasing the housing costs for everyone in this country. And instead, we should have a belief that regardless of who you are and your money, you get a place to live that is not threatened by anyone on whether you can stay or not. Okay, that was Jacky, not Jacky City. Jacky City. So it's very expensive for us to put somebody into home ownership and to provide $700,000 in down payment assistance to help one person get the jackpot to play and speculate in the market. So, you know, I completely understand, because again, the need for us to control where we live. So what we've been exploring are these tenant models that allow tenants to own parts of their buildings so that they can control the assets of which they're living in. And that's really what the COPA model that Kristen talked about in our plan is, tenants having a share in their rental building and being able to control where they live, how they live, but really doing it more communally. And when they decide to leave, a new person can come in and have that benefit. So I guess as a department, we're trying to maximize the benefits that we're providing so more people have an opportunity to live and remain here. And I don't know if Kristen wants to add anything.
You know, we're out of time, so I can't let her add anything. That was a great response. But thank you, Kristen, for being willing to jump in. I really want to thank both of you for coming, and for everybody to coming and participating in the discussion, and great questions. Part of our process for the hack is to leave you with action items, and it's a little tough because we're in this liminal space on this stuff. We don't have set deadlines, and we're missing a big chunk of the pieces of the puzzle. But you should look to us in newsletters and action alerts for opportunities to engage once this information is presented and available publicly. And we will be looking at the housing pieces of the DSAP and how the Google plan is fitting into the affordable housing expectations, and looking at the housing pieces of the community benefits agreement. I know, you know, folks have been working very hard and to get this stuff across the finish line, but it's just not there yet. So the one thing I did want to note, though, is that next week, you all are doing an update on the anti-displacement strategy at council, I believe. And
We are Tuesday, late.
And it includes, you know, part of what you're going to be talking about is both the status of this local and anti-displacement tenant preference efforts, and the status of the work that you're doing on the community opportunity to purchase work.
Yeah.
So you know, it's an update. We haven't driven people, but everybody on the call should really take a look at that. And if somebody could drop a link to the agenda, that would be great. Because I think you all are going to need support through this process, and council's on board, but it's really going to be up to us and the broader community to make sure that we stay on track. So we appreciate the work that you're doing, but we want to be there to support. I think that's it. That's it for me, Kriti. If you want to close it out. Thanks again, everybody, for coming.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Jackie, Kristen, and Matthew, for, you know, leading the way in this discussion. Everybody for offering your thoughtful questions, comments, feedback, etc. in the chat. It was quite lively, and you and I did our best to keep up with all the questions coming our way. So thank you for that. There is a link for Tuesday's council meeting in the chat, and I'm just going to launch a quick three question poll for us to get a sense of what you kind of left with. Just a snapshot of how this event shaped your understanding of what's going on with affordable housing at Diridon. And just another quick reminder, this is a monthly event, so same time, same place as in Zoom on the 4th Friday of the month. We will next month be having a discussion on opportunity housing in San Jose. Again, this is hosted by Silicon Valley at Home, or SV at Home. And we are, your regional organization advocating for affordable housing policy, offering educational events, tons of resources online on our website, social media, etc. And a way that you could support us, in addition to subscribing to our newsletter, liking us on social media, is via membership and donation. And so we do have opportunities for you to contribute to our work in that way. And we'll be sure to send out an email with these resources as well as an opportunity to contribute in that fashion. So again, we really appreciate hearing from everyone here. Thank you so much, Jacky. Thank you, Kristen. And we look forward to engaging further on this topic as the planning continues.
Thank you for your partnership. We appreciate it.